So we're joined all the way from St. Louis, Missouri by Dr. Paris Woods, author of the Black Girl's Guide to Financial Freedom, entrepreneur, financial coach. We thank you so much for taking some time for us today. This is our personal finance class here at Velma Jackson High School. I've got a room full here with me, and we're recording this for all of our friends in Madison County schools, including my good friend, Coach Robin Mercer over at Madison Central High School, Ridgeland High School, Germantown High School, the Academic Options Center, and our YouTube channel. So thank you again for taking some time for us today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me.
Now, obviously, we want to talk about we want to talk about the book, how it's really changed your life and helped so many
Mm.
people. But I want to talk about a little bit about your background, because you are originally from St. Louis, and I know you talk about this on your website. Your story is so incredible; it has to be heard to be believed. And then you had the unbelievable opportunity to go to Harvard University and graduate from one of the most prestigious universities on the planet, which is an accomplishment in itself. But like you talked about, just because you have the degree doesn't mean you're going to be financially free. So just give us a little background about how you grew up, and how that experience led you to Harvard, and then how that degree led you to kind of make the decisions in your life after some things happened.
Yeah, yeah. So I grew up right here in St. Louis, which of course now I'm back home. And I think the experience growing up here definitely had a big impact on the choices that I made, both to want to leave and go as far away as possible for college, and then some of the life choices that I made after that. I grew up for the majority of my life, sort of in this three-woman sort of household, right? So as my mom as a single mom, and then my sister. And I think we did all right with the three of us, and and sort of went to lots of different schools. I think it was really hard. My mom was on a journey to find good schools for us, and that was a challenge. I think the public schools weren't as strong here, and sort of participated in some different programs. Eventually, got myself into the gifted program, and right around that time, my aunt, my one and only aunt, was killed. And so her four kids, my cousins, came to live with us. And so suddenly our home, which was doing all right, we're kind of stable, became six kids and a single mom. And that was such a huge shock, I would say, to my system, to our family, to our finances. Everything sort of felt as if it had been turned upside down. Um, and all the while, school had been the thing that I was good at. So I loved reading books, and, was very invested in school. And so I sort of just put my head down and was like, I'm going to do anything I can to get a full scholarship. I know we didn't have money for college. So I'm like, all right, I got to get a scholarship. I got to get out of here. And so that, I think, is what sort of helped me set a goal to do something as crazy as wanting to go to a place like Harvard. It could have been Hogwarts. I mean, it's like you've never met anyone who went to a school like this, and everyone's here. And I'm saying this as my goal, and folks are like, all right. But I got in, right? And so had the good fortune both of being admitted, Harvard and Yale and NYU. Those are my three schools that
Wow.
I applied to and got in. And I got into Harvard early, so I would have applied to more. So I'm not telling kids only apply to three schools. But I got into Harvard early admission, so I stopped my applications, and got a full scholarship, full need-based scholarship, which
Wow.
back then, it was like $40,000 and below full scholarship. Now it's like $100,000 and below full scholarship, and plenty of financial aid. And so that's what sort of set me off on the journey. And this opportunity to go to Harvard, of all places, was a dream come true for me, for the family. I was on the news. I was, it's like big deal for the community. Um, Once I got to Harvard, of course, that was another huge transition. You imagine any and everything that could be different, from St. Louis to Boston, from the weather and the snow to the culture and how people talk to you or don't talk to you on the street, to the academics being so very different from how I was in high school. Everything was so different. I went to college planning to become a psychologist, and was like very intensely aware of the different preparation that I had versus friends who had gone to different types of schools, and so became very interested in education and interested in leveling the playing field. And so that's what sort of set me off into this career in education. And yeah, and so I think that we took it from there.
Yeah, and you talk about on your website that you had the amazing ability to go to Harvard. You got the degree, But a big misconception in society is having the degree is what equals the money. And you even say on your content that just because you're making the money doesn't mean you're rich. There are people, we had a guest yesterday that talked about they knew somebody that was making $500,000 a year living paycheck to paycheck because they weren't utilizing the strategies, they weren't utilizing common sense, they weren't even being smart about how the money was managed. So, just talk about what led you to write this book, The Black Girl's Guide to Financial Freedom. Because look, I'll be the first person to admit, and as somebody that come from such a tough situation, uh, there was not access to resources in rural communities, especially rural Black communities, for decades. But books like what you have and so many other people are changing that. So young people should be able to learn these things now. You don't have to go to Harvard to be financially free. You don't have to even go to college to be financially free. You can use common sense things and just knowing the basics right now to start making good decisions for your future.
Oh my goodness. It's so true. I had this moment. So I've set off on this career, right? I've checked off all the boxes. I did my undergraduate degree at Harvard. I went back and did a master's degree in education at Harvard. And then I'm living the dream, running I was an executive director of a nonprofit. And I sort of like had this moment at age 30 where I sort of look up and I look around and say, I've done everything that society has taught me to do, and I'm experiencing that feeling of being broke. And I had all this debt. I had student loans from graduate school, not from college, but from graduate school. And I had my car note and sort of like had credit card bills that I had been accumulating over the years, and was living in just like a tiny little studio apartment, my first apartment ever on my own. And yet it was like this tiny little, and so I, was having this wondering about like, why, despite having achieved every goal I set for myself, did I not feel as it even stable financially, much less sort of living the dream that I would have dreamt for myself when I set all these goals or set off on this journey. And so that sort of is what set me off on a journey about it's time to educate myself on money. I picked up Dave Ramsey's book, of course, and started to realize the pitfalls of having put myself into so much debt and the stress, the financial stress that was causing me. So that was a turning point in terms of starting to educate myself and really digging deep into learning how to manage money, how to budget, what are good financial decisions, what are some of the mistakes that I made. And so that was a turning point for me, both in getting out of debt, but also realizing that I could earn more money. I didn't sort of have to accept whatever was put in front of me. So I did. So I started earning more money. I got myself out of debt, started investing, and sort of really making smart financial choices. And all of that set me up for what happened during the pandemic, which was that I got laid off.
Yeah.
Got laid off from my job at what would have been sort of one of the worst times ever to do so. And luckily, because of the choices I had been making, I was able to use that to my benefit. And I thought, well, how great. Now I get to take a vacation. Now I get to sort of enjoy some free time. I was working on my doctorate. I get to do that.
Yeah.
And so that it made me sort of think about, how is it that I have been able to take advantage of an opportunity that would have caused so much financial stress for anyone else, or even for myself if I hadn't been on this journey. And I really felt called to share both my journey, but also some of those lessons that I had to learn the hard way. Writing is something I've always enjoyed doing. And so writing those lessons out into a book just felt like the most natural way for me to share them. But it was really me saying, how can I help other folks be able to have these kind of choices? Because, life is unpredictable. We never know. It's almost an if instead of a when
Yeah.
something's going to happen. And so, how do we be prepared for those things? And I really wanted to help folks either get ahead of it if we can get, especially the young people. Like, I'm so happy to be talking to your class. And at this age, you can really get ahead and set yourself up.
Yeah.
But even if you haven't, and you're sort of making the mistakes, someone you could relate to say, actually, you can recover. Here's what I did to get out of that situation and turn things around. And so I've been so blown away that folks have been receptive to even reading my story or sort of reading some of these lessons that I've learned. And I'm hoping that other folks are, especially young people, are able to avoid some of these common mistakes and really create a life where, regardless of what happens to you, that you have choices, you have options, and you really do get to experience this kind of freedom that we're all dreaming of.
Yeah, and me and you are about the same age, so we grew up in a time where social media did not dominate teenagers. And look, social media obviously has its benefits because that's the way I found you. But I always say, find things that'll uplift you, find things that are positive. And look, I like the celebrities too. I like the athletes. I like seeing what they're doing. But just to think that you can just walk into that lifestyle without having some type of plan is just crazy. And even simple things. And look, I understand these kids are 15, 16, 17 years old and they haven't had to worry about a lot of the things we have to worry about. But even simple things, these kids are so worried about getting a big paycheck, they don't think about the future. I just lose my mind when I see the meme that says they need to lower the retirement age. Well, you can lower your own retirement age if you save your money right. It has nothing to do with the age, it has to do with money. So even simple things like if you're not putting in the maximum amount that a company will match on a employer compensated retirement plan, you're crazy. Or even putting away even like $50 a month on deferred compensation. You don't even miss that money. And I'm not even an expert and I could tell you that. So just simple and look, I know people haven't had a chance to tell them that, but this is the time you need to start learning these things.
Yeah, if only. I think that was, they say the best time to plant a tree. And I'm like, man, if someone had given me this book, that was my goal. I was like, I want the book that I wish someone had handed me at
Wow.
18, 17, so I could have avoided all this. So I'm so grateful for any young person who just picks it up and reads it, like how much further ahead they'll be than we were. So yeah, fingers crossed that folks at least flip through and take at least one action step differently as a result of reading it.
Yeah, and there's something else because you talk about you talked about in one of your videos, you have the luxury of choice. Everybody wants the financial freedom. They want the be able to do these things they see. But if you want to buy a house, if you want to buy a business, if you want to buy a car, there's certain things that are gonna need to be on record. Having a Cash App card is not gonna establish your credit. And look, these peer to peer, they have their place. I use them, but that's not where your paycheck needs to go. Going to Dollar General and putting $300 on Cash App is not going to help your long term financial success. So even simple things like finding a student checking account, how important is that for these kids that maybe want to start working while they're in high school?
Yeah, I worked in high school at the Gap. Because I just, it's so funny thinking about growing up and we got a lot of donated clothes, and I sort of have this like traumatic memory of like pulling these wrinkled clothes out of these black trash bags and trying them on in the living room. So of course the first job I had to get was at the Gap. And so I think, first of all, working is such a good experience for young people to have because it's sort of this next level of responsibility. I got to show up someplace, I got to clock in, whatever it is, but then you start to get a paycheck. And so this is sort of the first opportunity to really practice money management. So like you mentioned, sort of like what could it look like to create routines around saying, okay, here's my savings and here's my spending. And what if I set a goal for how much money I want to save? And what would it look like to stock that away each and every month, and sort of start to build those strong habits and be able to either buy the thing that you're looking forward to, or maybe it's even saving up. Like folks don't realize if you're going to college, the first thing you got to buy is books. So what if I, by the end of high school, have a goal of having saved $500 to be able to walk into college and be able to get some of those initial things? So I think saving is a really great initial habit to be building. Um, and then you're right. Whenever I talk to young people and they raise hands for questions, folks always want to know about credit. So that is on everybody's mind. At least our society has brought up credit and put it onto sort of young folks to say you got to build credit if you want to buy a car, if you want to buy a house, et cetera. So this is something I sort of spent a lot of time thinking about and talking about and writing about. And especially sort of if you think about the Dave Ramsey advice about just avoiding credit at all costs, which is really helpful for adults like the one I was, who got myself deep into credit and realizing, okay, I was not very responsible. I'm going to need to take another path. I think young people do have choices. And so you can say, okay, I actually have a choice. It is possible to live life without a credit score and sort of there's some additional paperwork and things, some inconveniences. That's one choice that I have. Another choice is to say, okay, I know that the credit card industry is set up to get people locked into debt. That is just like
Oh, big
how it's
time.
set up, right? Every time I go to the store, they're offering me a credit card. Every time I go here, there's a pay now, buy now, pay later. So there's a system set up that's designed to entrap me in debt. And then what am I going to do to protect myself? And one thing I recommend, get you one credit card and put one predictable bill on it, your cell phone bill, and then pay it every month. And that's it. Don't keep a credit card in your wallet. Don't start swiping it here and there and everywhere because that's when things start to get out of control. But how do you sort of build these guardrails around yourself so that you're not even tempted to sort of go above and beyond what you can pay off in full at the end of the month? So for folks who are interested in building credit, I would say know that you have to approach this cautiously and be smart and put some guardrails up to help yourself avoid some of the common pitfalls that so many of us fall into.
Yeah, and before I get to their questions, because a lot of them are wondering about the book, I do want to talk about that. The Black Girl's Guide to Financial Freedom. You've been on CNN. You've been, that book is literally taking you around the country to talk about it. So just talk about, where the book came from and kind of the content of the book. And even though it's called the Black Girl's Guide, and you really gear a lot of your stuff toward women, anybody could use your advice. I've watched your content and said, hey, I'm a white dude and I'm getting a lot out of this.
Yeah, it's so the book it takes you through basically my personal journey. So what happened once I had that wake up call to say, wait a minute, why aren't things working the way I thought they would work? And realizing that debt was such an anchor, such a sort of like pulling me down. So the whole first half of the book talks about how we get into debt through credit cards, through car loans, through student loans, how to avoid it if you haven't already made those mistakes. And then if you have already gotten yourself into some debt, how to get out. So the first half of the book is all about that. And then the second half follows sort of this realization I had once I got out of debt, was making more, starting to realize I can control my money. I can like set a budget. I can like make choices. Um, there might be some more exciting things, some more exciting goals I could set for myself outside of just getting out of debt, right? And so I had this sort of epiphany moment about like, well, what do I want to create? Like, if I were truly financially free, what would be possible? How exciting would that be? And then, how do I create a financial plan to make that true? So, the second half of the book takes you on that journey. We start with your dream. Chapter 5 is my favorite chapter in the entire book because it's about like, what do you want to create? Like, you get this one beautiful, glorious life. How do you want to use it? And then how do we use money? How do we make more money? How do we save it? How do we invest it so that you can create this life of financial freedom? And then at the end of the book, we talk about something that I learned sort of throughout my own journey that really piqued my interest, this concept of early retirement. And the FIRE movement, or Financial Independence Retire Early, is what the FIRE acronym stands for. And what inspired me about it was that there were people of all ages who had accumulated enough investments to be able to retire. I met, some folks who did this in their late 20s, in their 30s, in their 40s. And what inspired me about this was not that, none of us should be working and that this should be everyone's goal to retire early, but what power it creates to have the choice, right? So many folks, I think, are stuck in jobs that they hate or reporting to bosses who are abusive to all these things because they need the check. And so, what could be possible, and how might we truly be free if we're working because we want to, because it fulfills some need, because it fulfills some purpose in us, and not just because we need the money? And that's what I think FIRE affords us. So, at the end of the book, I sort of set you up to say, okay, if you were truly financially free and never needed a paycheck, how do you do that? What's the math? It's so attainable. And then that's where we end. Choose your own path. You can choose to retire early, or you can choose to just set yourself up so you never need a paycheck and you're working because you want to.
That's awesome. And we'll definitely get the information before we get done here to get the book. But I do have some questions from the students. And man, these are good. This first one is Leah Smith. She's in 11th grade, one of our cheerleaders, one of our volleyball players here, wants to be an attorney and wants to go to Howard University in Washington, D.C.
Yeah.
And I love this question. And she asked, what's the best financial advice you would give to a high schooler that wants to attend a large university?
Yeah, I love that. I also was a volleyball player. So I'm like, let's go. I was a setter. Yeah, if you want to attend a large university, and there are a couple of things I would name too. The longest chapter in the book is on education because I obviously have a doctorate degree in education and care deeply about this. But that one of the pieces of advice I would give to young people is, first of all, not to limit your choices because of money. So the first mistake I see folks saying is, I can't afford to go to college, and therefore I'm going to make some choices based on what I think I can or cannot afford. That's mistake number one. What you really need to do is figure out the actual cost. So we've got to break down the difference between what's called a sticker price, which is usually the big number we see. Here's what it costs. Here's the tuition. It's $50,000. It's $75,000. I mean, the tuition prices are getting out of control. And then what's called a net price, which is taking into consideration your family's finances, what scholarships you might apply, qualify for. And most folks never pay that sticker price. Everyone's paying their own unique net price. So that's where I would start. I would just Google Howard University net price calculator and see, if you can estimate what it would actually cost you. I think that's a good place to start for any school you're considering. And then you're empowered to know here's how much money I got to come up with to make this affordable. And so you can start to think about the different types of scholarships. And there's so many, even just the federal government provides free financial aid to young people who need it. So there's a form all of you guys are going to
Yep.
fill out called the
FAFSA.
FAFSA,
Yep.
right? Free application for federal student aid. They give out something called a Pell Grant, which is over $7,000 at the maximum. And so you start to align your funding sources, right? So great, I'm going to go to college. This is my goal. I want to be an attorney. I want to go to Howard. Let me get the numbers, and then let me start to line up my funding sources to make that possible. So that would be the smart approach for this young lady. She's obviously an athlete. And a leader, there are scholarships available. And so if you want to go to Howard, I would definitely start lining up those scholarships now to make it possible to be able to go without sort of taking on a ton of debt to make that possible.
Well, get this. She's taking the ACT Tuesday, and they get it for free during school.
There you go. I love
Where was
that.
that? Where was that when we needed it?
Oh
Uh,
man.
I like this one. This is Taylor Grayson. She's in 10th grade. And she asked, what was the hardest part about being in a apartment with a single mother and 6 kids?
The hardest part was probably finding time to study it quietly. Like I would have to literally just kick everyone out and be like, "This is my room. I need to study." It's funny. The St. Louis Post-Dispatch wrote an article. They did a piece on me my junior year, and there's like a reporter who just followed me around throughout the day. And so it's sometimes I reflect back and reading her words and her describing both everyone just watch because I'm the oldest too. I'm the oldest of six. So everyone watching me because I'm the big kid and trying to find, trying to copy me and do all the things. You know how little kids follow you around and all that. So just finding like quiet time for myself. And then for me, like I poured myself into school and poured myself into activities. I was in a ton of clubs and a ton of sports and things like that. And that was sort of obviously it was great for my college applications, but it was also a way for me to just like have my own, like be around my friends and sort of have a life of my own so that I wasn't so steeped into some of the challenges that were existing inside of that apartment on a daily basis. So at the very least, I would say if anyone's sort of facing anything similar, time it's a time bound, right? You have options, even if it's going to the library, places that are free and available to sort of get yourself some respite. And I think school is a great place to be around your peers, to have adults who care about you, who've been where you want to go. All those teachers have college degrees. If no one in your house has a college degree, you have adults at school you can talk to, sports and things like that, just ways to take care of yourself, especially during these most challenging times, knowing that the future can look brighter and that you have some choices you can make now that can really enable a very different lifestyle when you grow up.
Awesome. Well, I got time for 3 more. This is Jahan Kincaid. He's in 10th grade, and he asked, if somebody gets in debt, what is the best way to get out of it?
One thing that I found helpful is something called a snowball method. So you just take all your debts and you line them up the lowest amount to the highest amount, and then you just start socking away money, getting rid of each of the debts on that list. I got side hustles, selling stuff, just find any money that you can to try to get rid of those debts as quickly as possible. And I started earning more money, et cetera. So setting it as a goal, realizing, wait a minute, how did I get in debt? How do I stop accumulating more debt? And then coming up with a really good plan and being willing to really put some effort into getting it paid off and making a vow not to repeat the mistakes that got you in the first place.
Awesome. Well, I got 2 more. Both of these are about the book. I like these. This is Jarvis Lyles. He's a senior, one of our football players here at Velma Jackson. And he asked, what were the biggest challenges you faced while writing the book, and what was your writing process like?
Yes, I hope we have some future authors listening. I did a lot of research on how to write a book before I undertook this endeavor.
Okay.
And one of the best pieces of advice I received, this is why most people never finish their book, start with an outline, which I know we've all heard this, but for a book, it's like such a big thing. And the detailed outline, every chapter, here the story I'm going to tell, here are the three things I want to teach, just as detailed an outline as possible. And then the most important step is to dedicate time to writing, not editing, just writing. So I would sit every day and I would look at the outline. I don't even look at the page. Look at the outline and just type, 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 type. Just type it out, type it out, type it out. Don't even spell check, right? Just literally get the terrible first draft done. That took me about 8 weeks from outline to first draft. And
Okay.
then you can do your editing. Then you can sort of do and you can move things around and all of that. But the hardest part and the most important thing to tackle is to get that first draft done. And the only way to do that is to start with a very detailed outline and then to commit every day to just writing until it's done. So that would be my recommendation. And that made it easy for me. So it actually wasn't challenging, but because I sort of did the upfront research and knew what pitfalls to avoid, that's how I was able to get it done.
Awesome. Well, I got one more, and I love this question too. This is DeQuavian Black. He's in 10th grade, one of our football and basketball players here at Velma Jackson. And he asked, what do you think has led to your writing career being so successful?
Woo! That's such a good question. I wrote the book because there was something I wanted to say. And I remember friends asking me what were my goals? Like how many books do I want to sell? And I self-published this book. So I did the research on like, well, how do I hire my own editor? How do I hire my own designer? Like what are all the things a publisher would do for me? I'll just do it myself.
Yeah.
And so I spent money. Those things cost money to do. And so, of course, friends are like, are you going to make your money back and all of that? And I was really resistant to those questions. And I think looking back, that's what helped me. So I wasn't writing a book to make money, and I wasn't writing a book thinking about, is this going to be successful? How many copies are we going to sell, et cetera? And this I've continued to do with every goal that I set. So it's so much more about the effort you put in and what your intention is. And then, let the universe take care of what happens on the other side. I'm not responsible for the results. I'm responsible for the effort that I put in. Is this an A? Did I put in an A amount of effort? Did I do my very best? And does this represent what I wanted to share? And even if it only helps one person, then I've been successful. So I couldn't have predicted, and I've continued to be blown away. I think we're at 130,000 copies sold and,
Wow.
and still selling. So I'm like literally blown away with the reception that the book has had and so grateful that folks find it helppful.
That's awesome. Now we're almost out of time, and we thank you so much for joining us. But before we go, a couple things. ParisWoods.com, all of your social media handles are on there. You're linked to buy the book in ebook, audiobook, or paperback, The Black Girl's Guide to Financial Freedom on Amazon, everywhere books are sold. Or am I missing anything on that one?
Yeah, author Paris Woods on all social media.
Awesome. Now, the last thing before we go, and like I said, I'm just so blown away by your story, and it really is amazing how your simple beginning has literally taken you all over the country. But one thing I always say is that I have so many students come back to me later and say, I wish I would have paid attention. I wish I'd have listened when you talked about that. Because you may not think this stuff is going to apply to you. Well, I'm not going to college. I'm not going to need to know this. Or I'm just going to marry somebody that's going to make a lot of money. I don't need to know this. This is the basis of how you will survive no matter what decision you make after high school and how you want to continue your education or your career. So, how important is it at 15, 16, 17 years old to at least be familiar with how money works?
Oh my goodness. I every day I wish I could go back to that age. And with this book in my hand, I'd be rich. Right? I wouldn't have had to go through all of the challenges that I named. I mean, the truth is that you start making really important financial decisions. As of 18, you can start getting into debt. And that's something that folks spend a lifetime trying to get out of. So now's the time to prepare for adulthood and to be able to make choices that can create the lifestyle that you want. I know folks have dreams and things that they want to offer the world, things they want to try and explore and all of that. And money is a tool to make those things possible. So learning how money works right now is actually the key to whatever it is that you want to accomplish in your life.
I love it. Well, again, we thank you so much for joining us, author of The Black Girl's Guide to Financial Freedom, Paris Woods, all the way from St. Louis, Missouri. And I got to connect you with a couple of my friends in St. Louis. I think y'all could do some cool things together.
Yeah.
But again, we thank you so much for fitting this in your schedule. Paris Woods, all the way from St. Louis, Missouri. Thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
I talk to you soon, my friend.